Foldable phones. Let's talk a little bit about that. I think anybody who's listened to the MacCast probably knows my opinion on foldable phones. I just think it's somewhat gimmicky. I've never been really impressed by the technology. I know it keeps advancing and getting better and better. Apple has stayed out of that game so far, and according to new reports from display supply chain consultants analyst Ross Young, he says that based on his checks of their supply chain contacts, that they're going to adjust their timeline for Apple actually bringing a foldable display design to market, and they're pushing it out another year to 2025. I think, or actually 2 years to 2025, because I think they were originally predicting maybe 2023. But what was more interesting about this report is at the same time, the analyst said that they are now hearing that Apple is exploring the idea of a foldable laptop design in the form of a 20-inch foldable laptop design. It would also target a timeline similar to the phone, having a product ready around 2025, although they do note it could take a little bit longer, so it might be 2026 or later. They say the design could allow for a couple of different configurations. One, having a full-size keyboard and a display when it's kind of in the folded mode, and I would assume that means a virtual keyboard, not a physical keyboard. And then another that would be a full 20-inch display that could then be paired or used with an external keyboard, I'm assuming Bluetooth or other Wi-Fi technology. And you kind of have a 20-inch display and kind of a more of a desktop configuration, so you can kind of convert between the two different things. This is all very well and interesting, right? The concept of a foldable laptop has been out there for a really, really long time. Doesn't necessarily mean that Apple's actually going to produce one, just that they're looking into those design concepts. And I think it's important to remember when we talk about things like foldable iPhone displays and these different kinds of designs, that Apple is really always playing with what is the future of our products look like, right? What are we going to be getting into? And it's a little bit why I don't talk too much about patents that surface from Apple on this show, because it's all highly speculative, but it also is interesting to think about. What would a world with foldable 20-inch laptops look like, or really a foldable iPad to a certain degree? And even other analysts, I think, over at Bloomberg said it's going to be more like a hybrid iPad notebook design, probably running some sort of variant of iOS versus Mac OS. But Apple definitely looking years ahead to see what products and designs might be appealing to consumers. And really, I think you have to try this stuff. It's all R&D, and that's really what's going on here. So even though we hear about these sorts of things, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. The timelines are all speculative, but I think it's fun to think about. What do you think about a foldable laptop display? Kind of a tablet that just sandwiches in half. I think it's a great idea. I still prefer a physical keyboard on a notebook to a virtual keyboard, which is why even with my iPad, I prefer when typing, writing show notes for this show, for example, to have my Magic Keyboard, and I find that to be a much better experience. But maybe newer technologies in the future will make typing on a screen feel even better. We've seen designs where you have displays that sort of can form up and maybe form physical keys or those sorts of things. So maybe that technology comes to fruition along with this, and that could be very interesting. And you get haptic and tactile feedback. So there's lots of things that can happen in future designs and in future years, and we'll have to see what Apple comes up with. But another really cool design that came out this week that Apple seems to be exploring and playing around with relates to a patent that surfaced, a new patent from Apple that listed a computer in an input device. And this really harkens back to the origins of computers, the 80s, when we had things like the Apple I and the Commodore 64. Basically, what this looks like is a slightly thicker Apple Magic Keyboard with the Mac actually built right into the keyboard, right? And we've had these designs before. But this would be obviously much slimmer, much tinier, much cooler. Apple says in the patent that there would be a single I/O port, assuming something like Thunderbolt 4, and it would be able to drive an external display and carry power and data across it. I would imagine you'd connect it into some sort of monitor or display that would act as a hub where you could have other peripherals plugged into that. And it would be paired wirelessly with a mouse or a trackpad and a keyboard. So imagine your Apple Magic Keyboard is your entire computer, and that is pretty cool. And it also feels very possible, right, in the age of Apple Silicon. We have processors that can be highly performant and not generate as much heat, not take as much power. And so you could see them pushing something into something as small as a simple Magic Keyboard. And you just take that around with you everywhere and you'd have your computer. It's very highly portable, be able to plug into a display anywhere and get to work, which is a very interesting thing to think about. Again, when you're thinking about future designs and sort of how we might do computing in the future, what if this thing plugged into your AR VR display or just even wirelessly connected to that? That could be an interesting use case as well. So you could maybe have virtual monitors in front of you rather than physical monitors as well. So lots of things to think about. Very, very interesting stuff. I'd be curious to know from the community, what piques your interest? Are you following different design technologies and form factors and stuff like that? And what do you think the future of Apple's products, desktops and tablets and what have you, should look like? I mean, I still try to think about and speculate what computing looks like in the age of headsets, AR, VR headsets. What kind of input devices are we have? Are we going to have virtual keyboards that we type in the air? That doesn't feel very tactile or great to me, but maybe there's other kinds of hand controllers and those sorts of things. So what are you seeing out there? Share any thoughts and information with me. Shoot me an email or just throw an audio comment, maccast@gmail.com.